Hey you guys, David Helpling here, and we are back with another Behind the Mix video. In the last video, we went through my song, The Heart of Us, from my latest album, Rune, and the response from you guys was really incredible. So many of you stuck around for 45 minutes and went deep with me on very specific techniques and details and tools that I use to create my music, my ambient guitar music, and specifically the music of Rune. So in this video, we're going to cover something completely different. The Heart of Us is such a big, ambient, open, and simple piece of music that I thought it would be really cool to go to Freedive, the song that opens Rune. It's so much more dynamic, percussive, and textural, and really complex. And I think there's going to be some things that you're going to be excited to see. And actually, I haven't gone into this song and back into these sessions in quite a while. So there's going to be things that I'm rediscovering, and I guarantee you there's going to be some things you're going to hear that were not in the original song. Because this is such a complex song, I want to break these videos down into 3 parts. Freedive sort of became a 3-act piece of music with this ambient percussive intro and this really warm build and then a big melodic percussive sort of driving finish. So in this first video, we're going to cover the first act, which is all of this granular, plucked space that I created to capture the essence of what this song is about. There's a lot of cool stuff that happens in this first act of Freedive that I'm excited to dive back into and pull apart and show you. So let's check it out. So here we are in the session for this first act of Freedive, which I kind of ended up calling the pluck field, but it's really this granular space created by all of these separate guitar elements that are all in themselves percussive. So I'm just going to play you the first layer, which you'll probably recognize. On the album, it actually fades in, but you're going to actually hear what is going on. So check this out. So there's a certain feeling and sound that I was trying to capture with Freedive. And this is one of the times where I premeditated the kind of vibe and sound and rhythm that I wanted. I knew that I wanted this certain pulse that I was feeling, which is kind of this, up-tempo kind of grooving feel, but I wanted to have it very syncopated and loose. And I wanted to have a lot of tiny elements. And the reason for that is Freedive was me trying to express with guitar and with music the sound and vibe that you get when you dive into the ocean. I do a lot of traveling and a lot of amateur free diving, and a lot of times the first thing I hear when I put my head underwater is this little percussive sound of all these tiny snapping shrimp and the coral and the waves moving the sand around. And a lot of times when I do travel to the islands, Maui in particular, in February, all the whales are mating, and you hear this crunchy, clicky chorus of life in the ocean that you can feel and hear, but then you also hear these whales in the distance, and at times the whale sounds are deafening. It's really magical. I posted a video up at one point when I was on vacation using my GoPro, and it captured the sound miraculously of all of these clicking sounds and the whales together. Going back and trying to capture that feeling and that sound in music is why I created this intro to this song. I wanted the first thing on the album to be like you, the listener, diving into the water, and the first thing you hear are all these percussive little sounds, and you're immersed by the sound of the ocean, and then the whales come in and all this other stuff. So let's check out all the layers and elements that it took to create the space. So the first thing I played for you was this root note that I played, this one single muted note that is the sort of root and pedal point for everything that comes after it. So here's the first layer, which is just a single muted root note that is sort of the anchor that everything else is built on. You'll realize this very first thing is in the dead center, it's in mono, it's got reverb on it, and there's one thing that's missing, and that's delay, which for me is pretty bold, because when I'm playing with my guitar pedal board and getting my sounds together, usually the delay is what inspires my rhythmic stuff. But I really wanted to play this one clean with just the reverb from my Strymon Big Sky pedal. So this is the root note with no delay, and I actually added delay to it later, and you'll see that in the next video when we go into the full session. So here's what the second layer sounds like. And you'll notice that this sound is completely on the left and the right. There's nothing in the center channel. So that root low muted note is dead center, and now I have this sound that's panning left to right, and it's tiny and thin, and it surrounds you already. So with only 2 layers, we're already creating space. So let's play those at the same time. I love that. Just what's happening right now. You've got this awesome note right in the center, and it's rooted and it has gravity and it has warmth. Then you've got these really bright little guys going left, right. It's already starting to give you this rhythmic feeling, and it already sounds kind of granular, which is cool. Let's listen to the third one. Okay, this one's really cool. In this one piece, we're sort of doing what the other 2 did. Now there's a sound in the middle, and its echo repeats are left and right, but it's a higher note even still, and it's syncopated, so it's not playing on top of the second part or the first part. I'll play all 3 of those together. Check this out. So there's a symphony of stuff already happening, especially with the kind of reverbs I'm using and the delays. There's a lot of space being created, but there's still 2 more layers that I added to this. So let's listen to the fourth one right now. So this is one single high note because I'm really trying to fill out the register without ever going lower than that first root note, because I want things to sound tiny and granular and very detailed. So this is one very high note being plucked very carefully with a really bright open reverb. So check this out one more time. So then I added one more layer, and this is the last piece that was added to create the entire space. And that part sounds like this. In this last layer, I'm using a tapping technique where you don't use a pick and you just use your fingers to sort of hammer on and pull off the notes. And actually, we shot so much guitar footage for the free dive video that my director, Joe Abreu, has put together a guitar-only version that you're going to be seeing throughout this and the other 2 videos that are going to cover this free dive behind the mix. So that's what you're seeing now. So without going too crazy deep, I want to go into each of these layers and show you some of the processing that I did to get them to all exist in the same space, but all to be heard instead of just jumping on top of each other. So let's check that out. So as you guys remember from the last video, I'm a big fan of the fabfilter plugins, in particular the Pro Q3 EQ. Now on this first part, hold on, let me solo it real quick. On this first root note, I've got a pretty aggressive EQ on it, which you can see looks like this. And I was really trying to clean it up so I didn't have all of this low end. And we have that typical 500 hertz bump that is always in ambient guitar that you really need to pull down to get it to be balanced and to open up. And we had all this high end for some reason, just because of the settings I chose on the day, the way I was playing my guitar. That's just how it came through. So without this EQ, it sounds like this. Here's the original recording. So you hear all that crunchy stuff on the top. There's sort of that frothy, big 500 hertz mid-range, and there's some bumpy stuff on the lows. You clean all that up, and it really sits in the mix really nice. And that's all I put on this first one, was just an EQ. The second layer, this guy right here, also has a Pro Q on it, doing a completely different job. You can see that I've scooped out all of this mid-range because I wanted it to sound tiny. I wanted to hear all the sound that's going on up here, all this intelligibility and the bright little plucks, but not all of the body, because we want this track to live with the other track in the same space and not take up all the frequency range. And on this part, right after the EQ, I'm using this delay plugin from Universal Audio, which I also talked about last time. This is the Korg SDD 3000. And last time I mentioned that they emulated it so closely that I felt it was too accurate. And what I meant by that is they modeled the specific noise that this delay put out. Now, in a rock situation, using this plugin on a guitar or a vocal or whatever you want, you're not going to hear all that. But in my kind of music, everything is exposed and everything is ambient. So it's a bit noisy for my tastes, and I need to do a few things to let it sit in the mix. This delay does something very special that other delays don't do, and it's something that can be done all within the delay itself. There are different modes for the way the signal is ran. In mode number 3, it's a mono in, stereo out, but what you end up with is the direct signal on the left channel and the delayed signal on the right channel. And this was really important to get this sound out of the stereo field. So I've got it set to a dotted quarter note, and the big magic that happens on this guy is this amazing modulation, which is the secret to any kind of really good delay for me, is to get it to modulate and have the pitch waver in a way that makes it almost detuned. So this guy is going through the Pro EQ, through the SDD 3000, and then after that, I've got a Valhalla shimmer because I really wanted to have it be like this really thin veiled blanket that went around that main piece. So once again, by itself, with all three of those guys, it sounds like this. You'll notice that you only hear the original sound on the left, and the delayed repeats are on the right, and there's nothing in the center channel. And then we've got a little bit of that Valhalla reverb to just put it in the space and help us start to get into a place that feels like we're in the ocean. God, I love that. I love the sound of this delay, and I love putting the shimmer on it. So let's go to the third layer and see what we did differently to get it to live in the same place. The third layer sounds like this. And on this one, I'm using another Pro Q and also a Valhalla delay. So let's talk about this. I think in this case, the Pro Q was really trying to pull down all of this dead on mid-range right at 1K. And you can see I've used 3 EQs that overall the sum of them is just scooping everything out. This is a very aggressive process. When I was trying to write the music and trying to chase down the idea of making it sound like you're underwater, I was being very spontaneous and I was improvising. And sometimes the sound that comes out is just what you get. And in order to get this guy to play nice with these other guys, I needed to pull down a lot of that mid-range. You can even look at the waveform and see how big it is compared to the other ones. Without this EQ, it sounds like this. So it's like total AM radio. There's all this stuff happening right in your face in the mid-range that would just squash all over the other ones that we used already. So this is a very important part of it playing along. Now, without this Valhalla delay, it's just what came out of the pedal board, which sounds like this. Which I think doesn't have any delay on it. I think that's just me playing it dry, and this one's also using the tapping technique. Now, what I did here is I used a ping pong at a dotted eighth note so I can get the delay to be on the outside, and it's at 50%, so we're going to really blend it together and give it all one big sound where you're not really discerning that there's one sound in the center and other sounds on the outside. So with the delay, it sounds like this. So there's a lot of stuff going on left, center, and right. And it really sits well with both of the other ones. And there's no reverb on that. That is just right out of the pedal board, just the EQ and the Valhalla delay. So it's really cool for me to come back now and sort of see how much I was premeditating how I might produce all of these sounds together. Some of these sounds are so simple, and I'm not using a lot of delay and reverb effects on the pedal board. So it's cool for me to go in and take this apart and realize that I really did have a plan. And you'll see when we go into the next session how all of these are treated together. So I'm just discovering that right now, and it's really cool. So let's go back to the last two layers and let me show you how they interact and what their jobs are. So let's talk about this really high guy. I believe it's just a single note. A very high single note. And we've got a Pro Q on him. Oh man, this is ridiculous. Look, what is left? I've taken almost everything out of this original recording. Let's hear how reckless this would be without the EQ on. Here's without the EQ just as it was recorded. So it's this big, warm, kind of a muddy sound. And I was going for clarity. So I took everything out except for the part that really needed to be in the track. And I think I did put a delay on that. Yes, I did. I've got another Valhalla delay. This one, instead of tape mode, which you saw the last one I was using was in, which is a warmer, more mid-rangey tone, this one is set to digital because I was really going for some clarity, I think. If we turn this off but leave the EQ on, you'll hear this guitar part by itself. That is so interesting. There is no delay on the recorded part, just this really high note and this awesome reverb that I love from the Timeline Big Sky pedal called Cirrus. So that's all that's there. So the delay is added after the fact, and that's not something I seem to be doing anymore. But once again, it is cool to go back and see that I was really premeditating how much processing was going to happen in the mix. So similarly, we're using a dotted eighth note in ping pong mode again, but this one is actually mixed really wet. There is more delay than original sound. So I'm really trying to smear what is happening so it sounds like there's way more than one thing going on. Let's check it out with the delay on. It's just like everywhere. I love it. And you can see I've taken all the lows out. This roll-off is so high, it's way up into the mid-range. I'm really going for a tiny, tiny sound that is percussive and everywhere. So cool. All right, let's listen to the last layer and see what we have going on and what's on it. On this guy, we have a Pro Q and a Valhalla delay. There's also some Console 1 instances in here, and in the last video, I talked about how cool the Console 1 is as a hardware-software combination. To be able to have controls at my fingertips that I'm grabbing and moving and just using my ears to create the sound is really important. So I'll open up a couple of the Console 1 instances so you can see what they're doing, but I think they're pretty mild. You can see that I've got, a low roll-off and a little compression on this guy. A massive roll-off, even further EQ to get it really tiny on this one, and a little compression. And wow, even more so, I'm leaving so little left to become part of this pluck field that intros the song. So those are the 5 individual elements that made up this pluck field that is the intro to Freedive before we get into the whirlpool and all that other stuff that's going to happen, which is actually really exciting. So let's go to the main session because I want you to see how I edited all of these parts together and the way I chose to layer them and introduce them over time for them all to exist in the space. So let's check that out. Here we are in the full mix session, and you can see that I've got these 5 green stereo masters that were made from the elements that I just played for you. But these are really long. They go the entire length of the song, which is over 7 minutes. So let's go in deeper and take a look at these. I'm going to expand these tracks so you can see what they look like in their final forms. Let's zoom in a little bit. So obviously, I had to take those individual phrases and riffs and copy and paste them and crossfade them together so they were in perfect sync and in perfect rhythm throughout the entire piece. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of these parts were played to be sparse, knowing that I was going to have some processing later on, not using delay, not being so aggressive with all the outboard stuff. So here's all of these 5 elements, and you can see how they each fade in and begin as one element, and then all the pieces are added and cascade until we get to the fullness of the sound, which is right about here. So I do have all of this pluck field, or all of the members of this pluck field, going to a master bus, and on that I've got a Manley compressor, a Pro multiband, which we touched on last time, and I love this thing, and you'll see how important it is here. And then one little Valhalla shimmer to really glue all of the members of this thing together. The reason I'm using this particular plugin, which is from universalaudio, this Manley compressor is really designed to glue a mix together. I think a lot of times this particular compressor is used on a mix bus, like the entire drum bus, for example, to really give it a little compression, but it also changes the sound and gets everyone to sort of live in this space. It's very difficult for me to describe, but I do have this on the mix bus, and it is barely moving. This VU meter represents the gain reduction. So you'll see this move a little bit when it's compressing. And you will see the multiband sort of take care of some of the buildup that happens when everyone starts to play at once. And then we have just a little shimmer on the outside. So I'm going to play it from the top, and we'll hear just the green guys, and you will get to hear what they sounded like without all the other instrumentation. Let's start right about here. So now we have the second and third layers entering the space. And you can barely hear him, but there's the super high guy that was tapped. He's coming in. And then we've got our last guy coming in. So right now we are hearing the entire pluck field in all of its fullness. And you can see that the compressor is doing very little, but when you turn it off, there is a separation and a warmth that's happening. You turn this guy on and everyone just hugs each other and becomes present. I can't explain it, but I like what it does for mix bus applications. And you can see that the Pro multiband is really just waiting for times when there's going to be collisions and things are building up to just keep things under control. Also on the high end, because sometimes this got a little too bright for my taste. And the Valhalla shimmer that is on here is really not very wet. I've got it at like 30%. It's not overly huge. I've rolled off a lot of the low end. It's just adding that space that really makes me feel like I'm underwater. Let's turn it back on. So that wraps up the first act of Freedive and this granular space that was created to really get us into the water. In the next video, we're going to go into the whirlpool, which in this case is sort of acting as our whales and where a lot of the real music starts happening. As always, thanks for watching. If you like what you're seeing, press the subscribe button. If you have any questions or comments on any of this stuff, please leave them here. I read all the comments. I answer the comments as much as possible, and I love interacting with you guys. Thank you so much, and we'll catch you in the next one.